The corporate world has long operated on a foundation of unspoken rules, silent agreements, and the delicate dance of professional courtesy. But one of the most sacred norms, that of accepting a job offer from one company while secretly entertaining or even committing to another, is now being called into question in a major way by JPMorgan Chase, one of the largest and most influential financial institutions in the world. In what many are calling a bold and controversial move, JPMorgan has reportedly instituted a new policy. Any employee caught accepting future-dated roles at other firms will be immediately fired. The implications of this decision are reverberating across Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and college campuses nationwide, sparking heated debates about loyalty, ethics, power dynamics, and the very nature of career mobility in today's hyper-competitive job market. This isn't just about breaking trust with an employer, it's about a seismic shift in how companies view their employees and how employees view themselves. For decades, it was common practice among top-tier graduates, particularly those entering finance, consulting, and tech, to accept offers from prestigious firms like Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, or Google, not necessarily because they intended to stay, but as a stepping stone. Many students would take a role for a year or two before moving on to startups, hedge funds, or entirely different industries. This to-and-out mentality was especially prevalent in investment banking, where analysts often use their time at bulge bracket banks as resume padding before pursuing MBAs or private equity opportunities. But there was always an understanding, sometimes explicit, sometimes not, that if you accepted a position, you were expected to honor your commitment until you had fulfilled your obligations. That usually meant staying through the end of the fiscal year, or until your successor could be trained and transitioned in. Jumping ship early without notice or explanation was frowned upon, but rarely punished severely. Until now, JPMorgan's new stance represents a hardline approach to what has traditionally been seen as a flexible relationship between employer and employee. According to insiders, the firm discovered that several junior bankers had accepted roles elsewhere months, and in some cases years in advance, effectively ghosting their current responsibilities once their exit date arrived. Some had even negotiated start dates with competing firms that aligned with bonus payouts, ensuring they received their full compensation package before leaving. This behavior, while perhaps understandable from the employee's perspective, was seen as deeply disrespectful and disloyal by management. In response, JPMorgan reportedly issued a sweeping directive: employees who have accepted future employment with another organization must disclose it immediately or face immediate termination. The message was clear: you're either with us or you're against us. What makes this move so shocking is not just the severity of the punishment, but the fact that it flies in the face of modern workplace culture. In an era where job hopping is not only accepted but encouraged, with LinkedIn profiles featuring 5 or more employers within a decade being the norm rather than the exception, JPMorgan is drawing a hard line in the sand. Employees are no longer allowed to play both sides. They can't collect a paycheck while planning their escape. They can't maintain multiple offers in parallel, using them as leverage in salary negotiations, and they certainly can't quietly agree to leave in 6 months while pretending everything is fine. From a legal standpoint, JPMorgan's actions may be protected. At-will employment laws in the United States allow companies to terminate workers for any reason, or no reason at all, provided there is no discrimination involved. And while this policy might raise eyebrows in HR departments across the country, it's unlikely to result in lawsuits unless specific contractual promises were made regarding job security or tenure. Still, the optics are brutal. In a time when companies are competing fiercely for top talent, especially among Gen Z and millennial workers who value transparency, flexibility, and purpose-driven work, JPMorgan's iron-fisted approach seems almost archaic. Or does it? There's a growing faction of professionals who believe that JPMorgan is simply enforcing a standard that should have existed all along. If someone is collecting a salary from a company, they argue, they owe that company their full attention, effort, and loyalty, regardless of their personal plans. Why should a firm invest resources in training, mentoring, and compensating someone who is already mentally checked out? Why should teammates suffer due to last-minute departures that leave projects unfinished and deadlines missed? And why should companies tolerate a system where employees treat jobs like temporary assignments rather than meaningful commitments? These are legitimate questions, and ones that JPMorgan appears to be answering with swift and decisive action. Critics, however, see this as yet another example of corporate overreach, a blatant abuse of power that punishes employees for doing what every worker should be allowed to do: plan for their future. After all, is it fair to expect someone to remain in a job they've already decided to leave, especially when they haven't violated any policies or broken any laws? Some industry observers liken this policy to non-compete clauses that unfairly restrict workers' freedom after they leave a company. In both cases, practices, critics say corporations are trying to control not just what employees do during their employment, but what they do afterward, effectively locking them into a path they may never have wanted in the first place. The backlash has been swift and fierce. On Reddit, Glassdoor, and various alumni forums, former interns and junior bankers have taken to sharing their horror stories of being caught in the crosshairs of JPMorgan's new policy. Some claim they were fired without warning after their future employers reached out directly to confirm details. Others say they were pressured into resigning voluntarily to avoid having a firing on their record. One anonymous poster described how she accepted a role at a boutique investment bank 6 months in advance, fully intending to give her proper 2 weeks' notice, only to be called into HR and told she was being terminated immediately. Another said he had been negotiating with a fintech startup while still employed at JPMorgan, thinking it was just part of normal career development, until his manager confronted him with emails showing his communications with the other company. "I thought I was being smart," he wrote. "I wasn't burning bridges, I was just exploring options, but apparently that's enough to get me blacklisted." That fear of being blacklisted from future opportunities is what worries many young professionals the most. In tightly knit industries like finance, word travels fast. A single negative reference or a mention in a background check can derail a promising career before it even begins. Supporters of JPMorgan's policy, however, argue that the company is simply protecting its interests, and that employees should not be surprised if they're penalized for acting in bad faith. If you tell your boss you're committed to the team, and then go behind their back to negotiate with competitors, you deserve what you get. One executive commented on LinkedIn. Others point out that JPMorgan isn't alone in cracking down on dual employment or pre-arranged exits. Several elite law firms and consulting agencies have also begun implementing stricter disclosure requirements, citing concerns over conflicts of interest, data leaks, and intellectual property theft. Still, few have gone as far as JPMorgan, and few have done so with such public force. The broader implications of this move are difficult to ignore. For starters, it signals a potential shift in how large corporations view employee retention and turnover. Gone are the days when a company might try to entice workers to stay through promotions, raises, or perks. Instead, JPMorgan is taking a hardline approach. If you're going to leave, do it openly, or don't bother sticking around at all. This could have ripple effects across the industry. Other firms may follow suit, adopting similar policies under the guise of protecting company culture, maintaining operational continuity, and preventing internal sabotage. Or alternatively, they may double down on efforts to retain talent by offering better benefits, more transparent communication, and greater career development opportunities. Either way, the message is clear. Companies are no longer willing to tolerate deception, even if it comes in the form of quiet resignation planning. There's also the issue of fairness. What happens when an employee is offered a significantly higher salary or a better title elsewhere? Should they feel obligated to turn it down out of loyalty, or should they be free to pursue opportunities that align with their personal goals, even if it means leaving their current employer in the lurch? Many argue that companies should be focusing on making their workplaces desirable enough that employees don't want to leave in the first place. If people are actively seeking greener pastures, maybe the problem isn't with the employees, maybe it's with the employer. And yet others counter that loyalty is a two-way street. If companies are investing heavily in their workforce, paying for certifications, covering relocation costs, assigning mentors, and offering bonuses, shouldn't employees reciprocate with a certain level of commitment? It's a classic chicken or the egg dilemma. Do employees leave because they're unhappy with their current situation, or do they leave because they're always looking for something better, regardless of how good things are? The rise of remote work and the gig economy has further blurred these lines. More than ever, professionals are treating their careers as portfolios of experiences rather than linear paths. The idea of spending 20 years at one company is becoming increasingly rare, replaced instead by shorter stints, freelance contracts, and entrepreneurial side hustles. In this context, JPMorgan's crackdown feels almost nostalgic, like a desperate attempt to hold on to a bygone era where loyalty was valued above all else. But whether that nostalgia translates into success remains to be seen. So far, the firm hasn't backed down. Employees have been warned, managers have been instructed to monitor email activity more closely, and HR departments have been put on high alert for any signs of defection. To some, it sounds like a corporate dystopia. To others, it's just business as usual. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this entire saga is the realization that your employer may be watching you more closely than you think. Whether it's through monitoring software, surveillance tools, or simple human intuition, companies are increasingly aware of when employees begin looking elsewhere, and now, thanks to JPMorgan, they're more willing than ever to act on that knowledge. Whether this marks the beginning of a new era of corporate control, or simply a short-lived experiment in authoritarian management, remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: you can't hide forever, and if you're planning to jump ship, you'd better make sure you're ready to burn the bridge behind you, because JPMorgan won't let you walk away quietly anymore.